Welcome to the Swim Swam podcast. I'm today's host, Coleman Hodges, and joining us today, he's a world champion. He is a European champion. He is a Commonwealth champion. And finally, I'm so excited to say this, he's an Olympic medalist. Today, we're sitting down with the sprint guru himself, Ben Proud. Ben, thanks so much for joining us. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Coleman. Yeah, really good. Currently sitting at the back of summer and yeah, life has been pretty good.
This episode of the Swim Swam podcast is sponsored by Commit Swimming, Swim Swam's exclusive team management software partner. Since 2015, Commit has been providing coaches with swimming's leading workout management software. And now, Commit has team management software too. Commit wants to help you make the switch from Team Unify to a simpler, more powerful solution. Their onboarding and customer service team will walk you through every step of the way. Check them out at commitswimming.com to book your demo today. That's COMMIT swimming.com. That's always good to hear. I'm curious, just that we're about a month out from Paris. Yeah, how things have been. How has the last month treated you? And have you been able to sit and digest what the summer produced for you and what you produced this summer?
I mean, if you say sit and digest, I'll probably have to say no, because it's just been such a, since racing has been a bit of time off, a bit of, catching up with friends and just like living my normal life. And I've kind of put Olympics completely in the past. Haven't really fully thought about it yet. So as I'm getting back in the water, that's kind of the time where I start to really, think about it. But because I would say as a whole, this Olympic experience, it just kind of left me feeling very content, very, very happy, very content. Not ecstatic, not bad. It just very leveled and feeling very good. So, and that's probably the best outcome I could have had.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great outcome. It sounds like any outcome you would want for sport or for something that you've had as a goal for a long time. It wouldn't have been the outcome that maybe I would have predicted in terms of you're already back in the pool. You feel satisfied. You feel good. What brought you back to the pool? I mean, obviously you took some time off, but what brought you back so quickly?
To be honest, a host of things. I remember back after Tokyo, with ISL starting a few weeks after. I just remember how, like, even though it was quite like a challenging time, like, no breaks, straight into racing, and quite like a heavy cycle afterwards. The one thing I did say about that was by getting back in quickly, it meant that I returned to swimming and didn't, drift astray. Because after Tokyo, that was kind of the time where, I might have done that and not come back. So this year I just kind of thought, get back into it, do some World Cups. That's kind of the plan at the moment, and potentially World Short Course, and then just carry on racing throughout this season. And yeah, I've still got unfinished business in the pool as well. So I kind of want to get everything done this year, and that means getting back in a little bit early. And but yeah, I mean, I think honestly for me, like, just getting straight back in just keeps you there. And also, I mean, maybe many athletes agree, like, you spend so much time working to get your body to this kind of like peak level performance for Olympics, and I only do one race, so it kind of felt like a waste just to do all this work for 3 years, and then just take a break and take 6 months off. That just didn't seem to be the smartest option. So I kind of wanted to capitalize on the work that we've done this year.
When you put it like that, it makes so much sense. And it's right. Like that was in my line of questioning for you, and we're going to get to that, but you only have one race, right? And your race is only 20 seconds. And so I love to hear that you're going to keep going. You're going to do some World Cups, maybe some World Short Course. Does Britain have trials to go to World Short Course, or is that a selection meet?
I think the selection's out there. I think it's just literally, if you want to do it, raise your hand, and they'll decide if it's worthwhile. I don't know if many of us are going to be doing it, but I think a handful of us are quite keen. There's definitely been talk about this 4x50 freestyle, which I know the other guys would like, because we had a great one last year at Europeans. Had a great team, and we're still missing a few people. So we thought, why not come back at Worlds and try to replicate it? But that's clearly if everyone's on board. So yeah, I think World Short Course for Britain is just going to be do you want to go? And yeah, maybe some junior developments can come along as well.
Mm-hmm. It seems like that will be the case in the US as well. We never have a trials for it, which makes me a little sad. I wish there was a few more opportunities for short course meters racing here in the States, but maybe one day.
Okay.
So you will get more racing in though. You have unfinished business. What does that mean for you?
This is what I'm just saying, because if I look at my career as a whole, like there's a lot that I've done that I didn't really set out to do. When I was a teenager, and I'm kind of now in this position where if I just carry on a little bit longer and almost, I won't really verbalize what I'm going for, but in terms of, I'm not looking for being the absolute best in the world, like a Dressel. That's kind of not, that's out of my grasp, but I don't think that's who I am. But in terms of just longevity and consistency, I think I can definitely do something which is, not many people have done. And that to me is my kind of like motivation, my kind of thing that spurs me on. And I've some things this year that I just want to do, and that just involves carrying on and more racing and getting more exposure to world champs. And and also, so for me, the plan is to swim heavily up until end of 2025, and then in 2026 there's not really much going on in that calendar. I don't know if the Commonwealth Games is going ahead. I don't know if Europeans will be that big a thing. So my plan is like continue swimming now, and then maybe in 2026 I'll take a break, which is what most of my teammates are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
seems like a great plan. I love that it almost feels like to me, and I've said this to a few other athletes, it seems like we just finished an 8-year cycle, right? Because you had obviously the postponed Olympics, and then the last 3 years we've had to cram so many championship meets, ISL, there's been so much competition that now we're back on a normal 4-year cycle, and everyone can kind of take a deep breath. Everyone can make their own plan, and it's very cool to see how everyone's digesting that, right? Or just reacting to that, because we can.
And we're going to have a lot of people, because throughout the past 8-year cycle, like you're saying, we now have some youngsters who have just come through, and I mentioned like Matt Richards, like who's been on the team for about 4 years. This is his first 4-year cycle, and that will go for many other people. So like it's a long time when you kind of think about it. Like this 3 years, it flew by really quick. But a 4-year cycle is a very different challenge in trying to manage it differently. And the fact that the carrot at the stick on the other side is the LA Olympics, I think you're going to see a lot of people hanging on just for that. It's definitely a big motivational factor for me to go to the Olympics in LA, where the crowd and the spectators and just the entire show will be something I don't think we'll ever see again. So, yeah.
Agreed. My boss is Mel Stewart. He won a gold medal in 92, but he always, so he'll talk about history and older Olympics, and he will always bring up the 1984 LA Olympic Games and how that set a standard. It was a paradigm shift. I think it certainly for Americans as well. It was like, it was Hollywood. It was,
Yeah.
it was just in a time where sport was kind of just becoming more professionalized and worldwide. And
Yeah.
so it's exciting to have another games in LA and to kind of, exactly see what barriers will be broken or what standards will be set at that
Yeah.
time.
And I think especially looking at the American team, it's seeing who are the guys that do push on and go a little longer. Like who are the guys that kind of, push past that slight comfort zone and really go until there. Because I mean, to be at home games and as an American is going to be such a huge achievement.
Mm-hmm. And I think that will, as you said, motivate a lot of people
Yeah.
to hang
Yeah.
on, and it'll be really cool to see who does and who actually makes that team too.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I'm a little not confused, but I'm very excited to hear
Mhm.
this update from you, because it seemed at one point that you were not the most in love with swimming and you might take a step back. You kind of alluded to that after Tokyo. If you hadn't have gotten right back into racing, you might have drifted off. I'm curious, maybe just in the last 6 months in this lead up to Paris, what has gone well for you and what has put you in this place of really wanting to continue on, and maybe with the carrot of 28 in the future, but certainly through the end of the next year, through
Yeah.
25.
Yeah. I mean, because this has always been part of the plan. I had my little hiccup back in post Paris where I just didn't see the love for it anymore. But there was always a plan to carry on swimming for a longer period. But in order to do that, it had to become more sustainable. And for me, growing up as a 18 to 20, 24-year-old athlete, I was fueled by stress. So stress and anxiety were the things that got me to the pool, that got me to training, and that was pretty brutal. And that was that was kind of how I worked up until after Tokyo. Was stress and anxiety just got me to the pool, it got me training, it got me some incredible results, but sustainably it was such a tough and exhausting time to go through. And after 2022, so the Commonwealth Games, it was always a plan to be a bit more sustainable and be more emotionally balanced with the swimming and lifestyle. But what ended up happening was I had this amazing partnership with Gloria out in Turkey to train there. And so then I was kind of on this crossroads. I was like, I can either go down the sustainable route and be a swimmer and make finals and do this thing, or I can fully invest myself into the sport, into the 21 seconds in Gloria, where if you haven't been, it's one of these places you have to go. It's everything you need for sports. It's fully kitted out just for performance. And so I saw this time as I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna get fully immersed into it and hopefully align my best performance with Paris, which we can probably get that later. But that's kind of the thing I've been in recently. And now Paris is done. Leading forward, it's going to be more that sustainable route. So how can I be a 30-year-old and swim as my career, but also do normal stuff and settle down and do the things that the normal 30-year-old should be doing, which is a lot of stuff that I put behind me because I was very focused on the event. So it's going to be interesting again to see how things pan out. But for the shorter term, I have this past year in Turkey found a very new system of training that just works. It's nice. I enjoy it. It's nothing I do is really a bad thing in a way. Like everything I do is done for a reason, and it's just such a nice way to train. Luckily, 50 you can do that. Hundreds and 200s and all the other events it's difficult, but I'm in a quite privileged position in that sense. So
Yeah, I love hearing that, and I'm congrats on finding something that has worked and getting to try multiple paths, right? Getting to kind of get from both apple trees, right? You did the Gloria path. Now you get to do the more sustainable path. And I want to talk to you a little bit maybe at the end about what that will look like moving forward for you. But
Yeah.
as you said, performance in Paris,
Mhm.
you're targeting that. Take me through British trials. You were 21 2,
Yeah. 25. Yeah.
21
25.
25. Was Did that surprise you? Is that what you had expected from yourself at that time?
Well, if can I go back to two more steps? So can I go back
Absolutely.
to Fukuoka? Because
Okay.
that's really where the pivotal point was.
Yeah.
I had a great year in 2023. Like, had some real good training, good experiences, but my system of training that I had kind of followed on and not created, because it was very much James Gibson's format, and we still carried on that. But I was trying to write more sessions. We got to Fukuoka and had a very, very average meet. It was just nothing was firing. Like, it wasn't much fun. Still managed to walk away with that bronze, but Cam, basically what he did was just shattered the entire sprinting world and made everyone turn their head. Suddenly you had to wake up, and we basically said, like, Cam has this gold medal, this Olympic gold around his neck, unless someone else there does something about it. So that really kind of spurred on a new change in the training, which probably today I'm not going to go too much into, because that's kind of the intellectual property for Marco and James, myself, and we haven't had a discussion about how we share that. But definitely changed a lot about how we trained physically in terms of commitment. And so that shift in training happened in September, and we had a lot of fun, trying new ideas and testing things out and exploring. And I had a really great short course meet off the back of that, and it was kind of this like instant click where the training it worked, it made sense, and the body was adapting really well to it. And so it wasn't a surprise that in trials in March or April, I had a good result, because the training was just working. And I'd even said to Ollie Logan, who's our race analysis, he does a lot of work with us as well. I said to him, in London, there is a chance I'm going to swim as quick or quicker than I will in Paris, because it's a great pool, easy conditions, the competition is very manageable, and so it's literally just a free hit to do what I want. Knowing full well that the parameters of getting faster were still there. There was still a chance to go faster in Paris, but there was a very big likelihood that trials was going to be a quick swim, which, looking at the year, it was my fastest swim.
Yeah. I'm curious just how because I had a big conversation with Cam recently
Yeah.
as well, and that was incredibly enlightening. It was really cool to hear about, just his training and how he's approached it and how it's
Mhm.
affected him, how it's affected his perspective on his swimming and longevity in the sport as well. But, we talk taper is always a huge buzzword in swimming,
Mhm.
and I'm curious how you were approaching that, um, in terms of trials and then
Yeah.
Olympics, but also just your philosophy on, you've been through ISL, you've done World Cups, you've raced a lot, and you've always been able to perform at a very high level.
Mhm.
And, like you said, you were like, I might go faster at trials than I will at at Paris. And it doesn't have a lot to do with the rest, right? It has to do with the conditions and what's surrounding it. So it's like
Yeah.
you kind of know how to go fast at all times. But how did the new training affect how you were targeting races or resting at all?
Yeah, significantly, but maybe not in the way that is obvious. So essentially, starting this whole new plan back in September, October, and looking forward to the entire year, we basically targeted three places where I can test out my new taper, because I had to feel comfortable with it. I had to be fully in control, and I wanted to be able to say, like, this plan in Paris, it works. We've tested it. There's no surprises. It will be good. So we used Romania World Short Course. We used Doha, even though it was off a very short cycle, and we also used trials to taper and rest and perform. So yeah, we used those places as like little testing grounds to go through the exact plan that I do, and it's very probably a bit too much, but it's very regimented in terms of what I do in certain times. And it basically got to the point where after trials, there were very small shifts I had to do, and then just look at the plan before Paris, so that the taper could sit really nicely into that Paris competition.
Yeah. And I mean, it seemed to obviously work leading up, right? You were bronze at the Doha World Championships. In Romania, you won gold at Short Course Euros, and then obviously at trials you did great. And so leading into Paris that month before, was it pretty much, I don't want to say automatic, but were you kind of on cruise control in terms of that preparation, knowing that you had done it and it had worked those 3 times before?
I would like to say yes, but just naturally, maybe it's just the way I work, but naturally, the stress and anxiety, like it gets to you, and it casts a lot of doubt. So like suddenly, I'm picking out minor things that might be going wrong in training, or like small issues that, I should be working on. And suddenly I'm thinking, like, will I even swim 21.6? Like, just a lot of like self-doubt. So it wasn't, clearly the plan, you trust it, had some great swims leading into it. A couple of, I think went 21.3 in training, outdoors in Turkey. Like, so that was a clear indicator. I mean, you can never say, but it was, indicators were there, but the self-doubt was also there. So it wasn't until that first swim, the morning swim in Paris, where I kind of thought, you know what, things are good. I'm in a good place. Yeah, it's worked.
Before we get to that morning swim, obviously, as you said, the Olympics is a whole different game, right? There's everything's under a microscope. If anything goes wrong, it's like they run out of protein in the kitchen, and like everyone freaks out, because everyone's trying to be at their absolute best. And then you have 6 or 7 days to just wait before you get to swim your one race. How do you deal with that piece of it?
Very simply, I didn't come to the village until day 3 of the meet. I stayed out in our holding camp and was basically, had great food, a great room, great conditions, and just stayed out the village for as long as I could, while still giving enough time to get into the village, adapt, acclimatize, and get used to the pool. And that, again, had been part of my plan for every taper I'd done, for previous competitions done in the past. It's like this heading in 3.5 days or 2.5 days before my first race kind of works for me. Travel, easy, stinger, rest day, race. Like that's just how it was. And that's always that's just my plan. Because like you say, we got to the village and the food was pretty rough. I was having smoked salmon, which was really good, and pesto, which was great, and pasta just every single meal, lunch and dinner. Because unfortunately, that was one thing that was a bit of a downside. But I mean, everyone's in the same boat, so that was not a disaster.
Yeah, and obviously at the Olympics, you want everything to be perfect, but I think that's part of the game, is that nothing ever will be, right?
Yeah.
Things are gonna go awry or just not be as expected.
I think this comes from also James, years ago. He said in village competitions, sleep just happens. You sleep when you can. If you don't sleep, it doesn't matter. Like, so it's just understanding that it's going to be, not ideal, but you just do it. You get through it. Like, there's nothing bad about having bad food and a bad bed. It's just, yeah, you get through it.
It seems James has brought a lot of wisdom, and obviously he's been your coach for a while. I'm fascinated by him as a coach and just how he's navigated through swimming in the last 5 or so years. He got to have a really cool role with ISL. I think he works with you now and a few other athletes, but and since you have started working with James, how do you feel like that relationship has developed for you in terms of just an athlete, and as well as having him as a mentor and learning from him?
Yeah. Well, if I start with this, I wish every senior athlete could have a time or an experience learning from James, because I think what he brings to the table is something that's so vital for senior athletes or people who are 24 and above. Just a very mature outlook, a very very realistic approach to life as a swimmer, and how to adapt to things. For me personally, like, I'm not the easiest person not to manage, but to deal with, because I go through times where I won't respond to a message, or I will just disappear. So James has kind of been the person who, through no matter where I was gone, like during COVID, or when I was back in Turkey, like, he was always there to make sure that my bubble was clean and it was good and I was heading the right direction. And so, yeah, I would say if he wasn't a coach, he's definitely a mentor, in terms of like, or like a supervisor. Like, he just keeps tracking me and make sure I'm heading the right direction. And yeah, and if there's any ever issues swimming or life, I normally go to him, and he kind of has a very authentic and realistic way of looking to it, dealing with it, and moving on. I don't know what Flo's outlook on it would be like with him, if it'd be the same or different, but I do think that any athlete would learn a whole lot from working with James. But in terms of what he does, that's his thing. So
That's his hang, and yeah, it seems like it's had some success. Obviously, you and Flo, 2/3 of the 2/3 of the medal podium in the 50 free, which is pretty cool. To have the same coach, and obviously you guys have worked together in the past and trained together and been teammates, and yeah, I'm hoping to talk to Flo in the near future too. So I'm gonna have to ask him, about the same thing.
Yeah, well, on the topic of Flo, probably jumping ahead a few stories, but the happiest point after the race, I saw it come second. I was like, okay, good. I'm happy with that. That's really nice. And as soon as I saw Flo was third, that was when I got happy. That's when I started celebrating, because I was like, that's just incredible. Absolutely, like, for James, for Flo, like, just completely out there. Insane.
There are some people who it's like you really want to see them accomplish something. I mean, in that heat, those were my two. It's like, I wanted to see you get a medal. I wanted to see Flo get a medal, because that it seemed like that was something on your CV that would be so cool to add. And then I wanted every French athlete to be successful at this meet, because it's so cool. And especially for someone who is as legendary as Flo in the sport and in that event, like, to see him get that medal was awesome.
Insane. Four consecutive games. That's just incredible.
Truly. So now we've talked about the celebration. We talked about the lead up. So, you get to the village. I did have another question.
Okay.
For a lot of athletes, a stinger is like a fast swim you do 2 days before race day, and it's a 50 for you. What is a stinger?
28 meters. It was 25 meters plus a few strokes. Just because, I don't like doing 25. It makes it feel too boxed in. So 28 is just kind of that slight more freedom, just to get some more feeling in. And so I did it same night as Flo. I think he did the 50 because he was still training for the 100 at the back end. 28, get the suits on, get the diver in, and just feel good. And that's all I needed.
Yeah. So then you get to race day, and like you said, after that prelim swim, you were 5th seed heading into semifinals. You 21.70 in the morning. How do you tell me about this? It always seems so hard to manage a prelim semis finals of a 50 because it's like how can you really hold back, right? Or like conserve energy, I guess is the right phrase.
Yeah. Well, this is probably where a bit of my arrogance might come in, because leading up to this first race, it was very much the conversations between me, James, and Marco was like, don't leave any stone unturned. Like, do not take any risks. Like, get through to the final, because I mean, the amount of qualifiers in the 53, it's 36 of them. You have no idea up until the last race what's going to happen. And so therefore you just have to put yourself in that position, get top seed, and make sure that you're through. But what essentially happened was I was watching the heats go prior to me. I was second to last, and saw the third to last heat go, and I saw Bukov swim, and the results were, they were fine. Nothing out of this world. So I knew there was definitely a comfort zone, but not going to switch off until I did swim. I got to 25, got to 30. I could see clear water either side of me. So I was like, a very impulsive breath. I never do it, only when I'm kind of feeling a bit like, I want to play the game a little. So I took a breath, I slowed down a bit, and made sure there was much more left in the tank. So I call it playing the game, because it's, you don't show your cards too early. But at the same time, after that, I spoke to Cam and I told him, I took a breath. I was playing the game. Don't. There's more there. So that was a real confidence booster, and I know in taper times, if I can kind of do that and play around a little bit in the heats, I know that come the semis and the final, like I'm in a good place. So that was an easy way to like finish that race completely feeling fine and save enough in the tank for the next rounds.
And I understand that for prelims, certainly, you're 16 make it through. There's a lot more room for play, we'll say, to play the game. And then semis rolls around, and does it feel different for you, or do you approach it differently, semis to finals?
So it kind of works like this. You have 3 chances to get the third swim to be as good as you can, and therefore you have to use the heats and the semis as a learning curve. So you pick up on small details, you start to manage and adjust what you'll do in the final, and so you can't really just like switch off and not try at all, because you have to learn something from it. So I knew in the semifinals, the only thing I'd change is my caffeine intake. I don't take caffeine for the semis, well, very little in comparison, and a bit of an older suit, and I don't do my priming, and keep it quite relaxed, but still try to like swim fast, and and historically as well, it's much easier to swim quick in the semis. There's this kind of like subconscious tension that you get in the final, where like you can drop your shoulders, you can relax, but deep down you are a bit more tense, and that affects my stroke quite a bit. So historically, in the finals I don't do so well because I swim better when I'm relaxed and open and I can, have a bigger reach and whatever it might be. So yeah, semi-finals were pretty much all there apart from the major changes that I bring into the final. But I do that all the time, and it was as much of a good race as I could do to understand what will bring about that perfect. It's never perfect, but that good race in the final. And yeah, same thing kind of happened in there. I knew I had a great start to the race. I knew I was in good position at 35. So rather than like building the stroke rate or building intensity just to maintain it towards the end, I just let my body naturally just drift off towards the end. So I took one less stroke and I just, it was much easier on the body that way. You don't lose speed, but you lose a little bit of speed, but you don't lose as much as you might think in that scenario.
It's crazy to me that like everything you're saying is making sense, and but these are involved changes that you're making and describing that affect like hundredths of a second, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I guess that is the game of the 50 freestyle.
Yeah, I mean, it is a matter of, and especially when you get to this like real top end like that, sub 21.5 range, it really does become like, how finely tuned can things be? And yeah, I think it's a beautiful event and I love it, but it's not as easy as I think it can be seen. A lot of like minute details.
Right.
So.
And that, I mean, I always enjoy talking to sprinters for that reason, because they are paying very close attention, right, to all of those little things.
I mean, so then you could probably argue a bit too much attention, maybe. I think there's probably people out there who would benefit from not overthinking about it, but for me, that's how I work. Just completely overanalyze all the little things.
So heading into that final, were you overanalyzing? Were you able to relax and
Yeah, I knew it happens all the time. From semi-final to final, if you're going in well, it just plays with your head. And I knew as soon as I tied with Cam, and I don't know when I found out that I was going to be in lane 4, but I knew I was going to enter this kind of like downhill spiral of what's going to happen, what's best case, what's worst case, and just like really like just overthinking far too much. But if I was comfortable to make these changes, I would try to completely shift that type of focus out of my performance life. I would try to rephrase things and maybe bit more optimistic. But it's just simply because I've had so many years where this is the scenario where I go into a very intense, very highly emotional 24-hour period that I just felt like I had to go through that. I had to let my body get scared, get nervous, get excited, and just go through all those things. I do describe that 24 hours between semis and finals as a really awful time. Very stressful, very anxiety-provoking, no sleep, couldn't eat. But I also know how to hone things in and zone things into that final moment for the final. So if you pick the starting point of the final as like a little singularity, so long as you're focused and you're in the zone and you're present at that point, whatever happens behind that, it really doesn't matter. I've always had this thing where I know jumping into the warm-up 1 hour before the race, I feel terrible. But jumping out, I feel better. And going to the race, I feel great. So it's just kind of that, quick return to normality that happens in those last 15 minutes before the final. So yeah, awful time in those 24 hours, but at the same time, I love it. It's a beautiful journey. Like it's all these big, tough emotions. Like it just makes for it to be so much more enjoyable and exciting and memorable, and it's definitely I'm not ready to go through it again just yet, but yeah, I love it.
I was just talking to a friend the other day about, this is not the same, but it reminds me of this, about being on airplanes and how it's like I get very emotional and very reflective on airplanes. And maybe that's because you're like up in the air and you have zero control, and you're kind of reflecting on your own mortality. And
Yeah,
therefore
yeah,
you can look at it honestly, right? With emotion and with care. I mean, it sounds it why that reminds me of what you're describing is because you've put in all of this work, right? All of this emotion, blood, sweat, tears, the whole analogy here. Um, and then you get to this moment, right? And it's like that day before, maybe you can look at it honestly, and
yeah,
or too honestly, or through this lens of
yeah.
it's all down to this.
But it comes down to, like, even your analogy with the planes, or your situation with the planes. It comes down to the very basic factor that, we are essentially kind of. I mean, there's many methods you can think about, but the body is maybe a bit more reactive to the environment, and the mind is a bit more, understanding, a bit more rational. But it's very hard to control those emotional, reactive thoughts from the body, because it's just instinctual. The body is under stress, so therefore it starts panicking. It starts, high cortisol, like feeling like that. Even though your mind is like, it's fine. Like, there's nothing to worry about. We'll get through this in 24 hours, or 2 hour
Yeah.
flight. Whatever it might be. But yeah, that's kind of like this understanding that, and the different ways that your body will react kind of helps you to just be like, it's okay, just calm down a little bit. And even to just ride that wave, just let your body be stressful, be stressed, be,
Mm-hmm.
trying to rattle the cage type thing. So yeah, it's
Yeah. And so you get through the 24 hours, you get to the race. How do you feel like you executed it? You've talked about kind of how you swam it in prelims, how you swam it in semis. Do you feel like you were able to execute the race plan you wanted to in finals?
yes, 100%. And I think this is the main reason why I left that pool and I left Paris feeling very good, because you know I know from that race there's nothing more I really could have squeezed out of myself. The dive plan, the breakout, the way I finished and held the tempo, and finished into the wall on 35 strokes. That was all part of the plan, and it was executed to a T, from what we'd spoken about with the coaches, and so that went exactly how I wanted it to. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I could have squeezed much out of myself from then. So that kind of put me in a position where I put myself in a winning position, but McAvoy put himself further ahead, and that's why I love sprinting, because you do your part and you see the results, and it's not not trying to play mind games or affect other people. It's just, do they perform in their own world, and do you perform in your own world, and you see the results, and that's all you can do. But yeah, I'm really happy with that result, and I think we still haven't properly debriefed about it, because 21.3, I think we think there could be more there. We had a great year of training, but in the grand total scheme of that pool, that environment, the occasion, like, I'm really happy with how things went. Um, so
What were your thoughts on the pool, on the 2.15 meter deep pool?
for me, when I heard it was 2.2 meters, I had a huge relief come off my shoulders,
Hmm.
because historically, like, I've had a problem with diving a bit too deep in a 3 meter pool. So I knew that risk was taken out, because 2.2 is what I train in every day.
Oh.
and I'm very used to that, and that's very comfortable for me. So yeah, I knew I was going to be, in terms of the dive, which is where it only affects me. That was all good. So I was very happy. It wasn't until we started seeing the effect on the results and the turbulence and how it impacted some of the races that just puts a bit of a question mark. I think the 50, like, there's no effect it had, like, unless there were other factors that made it slow. But it does kind of make you think, like, were we all just slightly slower as a whole? Was anyone affected? You just don't really know. But yeah, in the 50, one way to the other, I think it really had minimal impact on the racing.
So the next thing I was going to bring up was how fast this heat was. I didn't realize until I just looked at it before this. 3rd to 8th place is separated by 8/100ths.
It's absolutely, like, insane. And this kind of goes to why I was so stressed, because the what I could gain was very, very minimal. There was a talk about taking a risk and trying to go a bit more higher stroke rate and a bit more, put more into it. But I carried a risk with that. And the downside would be so much worse, because you have a slightly bad start, a slight issue on some of the strokes, and you go 0.3 slower. And suddenly, instead of being second, you're 8th. And that's a huge difference. So that was incredible. But I don't think I've ever seen a 50 freestyle finish that tight. It was, you can't really comprehend it, how tight it is.
Yeah, I mean, again, Flo was 3rd at 21:56. And then, again, Jordan Crooks from the Cayman Islands was 8th at 21:64. So it's amazing to see how much sprinting has moved forward.
Yeah.
Or where it is right now.
The last 12 months, I would say, has had a huge shift in people's outlook on sprinting. I think Cameron's really driven that, because we've had sprinters in the past, but Cameron's been really, like, articulate and very well verbalizing the 50 in a way that people understand and people enjoy. And he's definitely brought a new outlook from the whole swimming world, as to the 50 is quite a different event, and it's okay to be different. It's not 100 at all. Like, that's a huge shift. But yeah, it was definitely a quick event. And yeah, but where I sat was very happy for me. I was very happy.
Yeah. What does this medal mean to you, if getting a silver medal at the Olympics?
Yeah. I went into this year and went into the Olympics really convincing myself that I didn't need this medal, because of, like, it wasn't heartbreak I went through before, but it was really, like, brutal going through the last Olympics and having these, like, severely high outlook on what I should achieve and not reaching that. So I couldn't put myself through that kind of stress. I couldn't hold myself to the standards anymore. And it sounds completely silly, like, to say it, but I couldn't think about the medals. I could think about the race. I could think about racing Cam and Flo and Dressel and like how I would like it to go. But in terms of, like, real value, in terms of the metal and the medals, I just couldn't even think about it. But yeah, and then so getting it was clearly a big thing. But like I said right at the start, I just feel very, very content. And I feel like I did earn this one quite fairly. Like, I think I'd put in the work, and I was quite proud of myself. And it's really strange, because I've had a 10-year career, maybe longer, 11 years. And I think this is the first time where, from start to finish, the whole journey of that race was something that I really enjoyed and could actually could actually fully be a part of, because even when I won Worlds in 22, my head's still full of doubt. I'm still thinking like, oh, there's more I could have done. There's other people out there who could have done better. There's always these things that you think about, and you can't really enjoy the moment. Whereas this time, it just felt exactly how I could have wanted it. And it was. It's a very comforting feeling. It's a very nice feeling. It's silver medal is kind of like a nice place to be. Not too much change in life. It's just like and the medals are beautiful. I couldn't thank Paris enough for making such a great medal to take home. So love it.
That's so cool to hear. It's lovely to hear. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Did you feel like the crowd made a big difference here, obviously compared to Tokyo, as well as did you get to experience the Walk of Fame?
Well, I didn't experience the Walk of Fame because after the media and the press conferences, I fell quite sick. So I had a bad nose, and then I made it about 24 hours, saw some family, and then basically got stuck in bed for 4 days. I don't know what it was, but yeah, for about 10 days, 2 weeks, I was out of it. Just 5 days in bed. Had to travel back feeling real rubbish, and yeah, it took a while to shake that off. So speaking to James, I was like, 24 hours difference would have been a huge thing. But in this scenario, I think the body literally it does a thing. It just fights it off until you relax, and then bang, it hits you.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to enjoy any of the aftermath of the Olympics. I didn't see much. I just fell sick and was in bed. But I needed that. I needed that kind of rest at that point. But going back to the crowd, Paris, you can talk about the food and transport being quite bad, but the crowd was something that I will probably never forget. I never felt more connected to a stadium in terms of the people in it. And maybe that was the way it was laid out, because you're really quite face to face with them. But it was such a nice experience to be there. But when it comes to racing, my process from walking out to the pool to diving in is very closed off. I'm not looking at the crowds. The whole thing has been rehearsed for years. It's just me to my block. I do that. I do my stuff. I get changed, put my hat on, and get into the block. It's all superstition, whatever. It's rehearsed. It's pinpoints right the way through. So I had no idea Flo did this clapping thing until after people saying like, "Oh, what do you think of this clapping about what Flo did?" And I was like, I have no idea. It wasn't until I watched it later that I realized actually what he was doing. And I also didn't realize, I don't know if no one really speaks about this, but from my lane to Flo, so the guys on that side of me, I don't think they heard the whistle to get on the block, because they all kind of turned around. If you watch the race, they turned around and saw that we were standing on there, and so there must have been something, I don't know, maybe an issue, or they couldn't hear it. But yeah, that was quite a strange thing. I haven't really seen talked about just yet, but yeah, so I didn't know much about what was going on. My bubble was very small, and I was very focused on the moment, and it was cool to look back at it after watching the race and hearing Flo stories, and I think it was a great time. And in terms of the podium as well, I would going to mention Dressel, because he's someone that I still say is the best sprinter we have ever seen. And he was really he's probably the guy that missed out on the podium in terms of someone who I thought really should be there. But he was super genuine. After the race, he must be hurting in that scenario. I don't know how he is feeling after, but he came over to all of us and gave hugs and whatnot. And that was a really class act from him. But yeah, the podium just feels feels great. McAvoy, I think, fully deserved. Like, I love what he's done with the sport, with his journey. And I kind of see like similar characteristics between mine and his in terms of just the process to get there. Like, you know, from Tokyo, having to learn and adapt to new things, new strategies. But he's gone one further. He's fourth Olympics without an individual medal, and he was much deeper into this rabbit hole of this new type of training. So, like, you know, without a doubt, I think he deserved that gold. And then Flo, like we talked about earlier, was just like such a good, friendly, wholesome guy to share the podium with, and the fact that he was there just made that whole experience more enjoyable. So yeah, as a whole, it was a great time. So lots of positive to say.
love to hear it. I mean, this is what makes the Olympics so cool, is and getting to hear these stories afterward. It's pretty magical, and you know, almost gives me chills. But it's great to hear. And now you're back in the water. You're looking at World Cups. What does the next month look like for you, just in terms of training or preparation? I think you're in London right now, but you know, will you ease more into or lean more into that balanced lifestyle that you had mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, fully. Like, you know, I'm back in the water, but there is no real program. It's just, you know, turning up and enjoying it and just getting a feel for it, which is all we need. I'm off to Malaysia quite soon to do some work and go back to my roots, because, you know, that's ultimately where my swimming journey started before the World Cups. And, you know, I think it's going to be a bit up and down, and, you know, a bit of stuff going on everywhere up until January, where I'll start my real proper program and understand where I'll be and kind of have that plan. But yeah, now it's just taking things easy, do some racing, and hopefully enjoy that series as as more of a, you know, experience to be with other people and friends and competitors. And yeah, it's always a good time.
Sounds like a plan. Well, thank you, Ben, for taking the time to sit down and dissect all this. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And any parting thoughts before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think I was just talking with a smile on my face for the past hour. Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing to recap on, and thanks for like just taking me through it and taking the time to hear my side of the story, because yeah, I mean, I you know, we all do these things by ourselves, but it's nice when someone pays attention, and but yeah, I mean, let's see what these next 4 years bring.
You've been listening to the Swim Swam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take Swim Swam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.